The Bad Batch Season 3 Episode 9 is here. Somehow, Asajj Ventress has returned. From getting to see Asajj train Omega to more foreshadowing to the death of the other Bad Batch members, this episode might have been the most important of the show so far, and there's some very key details that you might have missed. So let's break this all down. Episode 9, The Harbinger, starts on Pabu with Crosshair and Hunter helping this person load their ship to go fishing. Now, even this opening scene is more important than you probably know, because very similar to the way that they focused on Tech in Season 2 and then his death was at the end, I believe this third season is focusing a lot on Crosshair, and by the end of the season he will make the ultimate sacrifice to save everybody else. But they're interrupted by Hunter, who says there's still no word from Fennec. Last episode we saw Fennec Shand, the bounty hunter, as Wrecker and Hunter went on a mission with her to get more information about what the M count means. Us as the audience knows that M count stands for midichlorians, but the Bad Batch have no idea, and this bombshell is about to be dropped on them in the form of Asajj Ventress in this episode. But we then cut to Omega and Batcher. As they're wandering around the island, Batcher starts to whimper as she heads towards this dark cave. Omega says they've been in this cave many times before, so there's nothing to worry about, but she finds a ship. This ship looks very similar to a B-Wing, but it clearly has some modifications to it. But we get a jump scare of Asajj Ventress. Now, many fans are extremely confused because Asajj is supposed to be dead. She has a canon death in the book Dark Disciple, but here she is after the events of that book, standing clearly alive. Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair show up as they ask for Asajj to let Omega go. Asajj tells them for clones that are trying to lay low, they're doing a really bad job at it. This is also foreshadowing to later on in this season when we see the Empire is coming to invade Pabu. This is seen in the original trailer that we got for the show with this clone assassin clearly on Pabu with a group of stormtroopers, but also in this other short teaser trailer that we got for this season, we see Hunter at the docks on Pabu looking up as the Imperials are invading the island. So if Asajj Ventress could find the Bad Batch this easily, then the Empire is probably not that far behind. Asajj tells them that Fennec Shand sent her, confirming that the hologram at the end of the last episode was Asajj Ventress. But Ventress tells them if they're meddling with an M count, then they're going to draw a lot of attention. And then Asajj gives us a definition of what midichlorians are. And this is very interesting and informative for a lot of fans who don't really understand what midichlorians do. She explains that everyone has an M count in their blood, at varying levels, of course. Meaning people with a high midichlorian count are force sensitive, but they need training to be able to wield the Force. That's why Omega, although she is Force sensitive, is incapable of Force push or Force pull or Force choke or Force anything. She needs to be trained first. Omega's response is, "So I'm a Jedi?" And Ventress has to put her hopes down very quickly and say, "No, of course not, you need training." And she also mentions that she's never known a clone to be Force sensitive, but also there have been millions of you guys, so there's a possibility. And she says, if you do have a high M count, consider yourself warned that the Empire will hunt you down. This is the title of the episode, The Harbinger. Harbinger by definition is someone who comes to warn another. And this is Ventress's warning to the Bad Batch that the Empire will hunt them down. Now, as Ventress is about to leave, Omega stops her, and Ventress tells her that it's impossible for me to calculate your midichlorian level without testing you. So Omega's response is, then test me, I can handle it. Omega says she needs to know what she is, and Omega's fixation with finding out who she is probably foreshadowing next episode, which is titled Identity Crisis, because by the end of this episode we find out that she is in fact Force sensitive. Asajj reluctantly agrees, and we see the first test. Omega is standing on a slippery rock, balancing a fruit on her head while standing on one leg. Now, this whole sequence of Asajj Ventress training Omega reminds me a lot of Yoda training Luke in Empire Strikes Back, or even Luke training Grogu in the Book of Boba Fett. But in this instance, this is a test to see if Omega is Force sensitive. She's not going to be wielding the Force. And Yoda and Luke were both Jedi. Asajj Ventress is no Jedi. Wrecker and Hunter are watching them train as Ventress asks them to leave, and Hunter's like, there's no way we're leaving you with Omega out of our sight. We then see Crosshair come in and say that he checked Tech's old files on the Republic archives, and they found out that this is Asajj Ventress, the old assassin during the Clone Wars. And now the Bad Batch don't trust her at all. She was a separatist assassin during the Clone Wars. Asajj overhears this and sends Omega on a fool's errand to go get a white blossom on a tree at the top of the mountain. And while Omega goes off, Ventress confronts her clone brothers. Hunter tells her to leave, and she says she'll consider that once she finishes Omega's testing. And Wrecker says, no, get in your ship and leave before we make you. And Asajj Ventress says, you can try. As they pull out their blasters and she forces them to the side, we get to see really how powerful Asajj is. She's just messing with them, not even taking out her lightsaber at first, and taking all three of them at the same time in hand-to-hand combat. As they pick their blasters back up, she has to finally take out her lightsaber and disarm all of them, and by the time Omega gets back, she has her yellow lightsaber up to Hunter's head, and she's force choking Wrecker. But the most interesting thing about this scene is Asajj's lightsaber. It's a very similar hilt to the one that she had in the Clone Wars. However, in Season 5 of the Clone Wars, her lightsabers are stolen by Barriss Offee and never returned. So I can only assume that she just crafted another lightsaber, this time with a yellow kyber crystal. Asajj lets Wrecker down and says that she's not their enemy. We then cut to a scene where Omega is talking to the other Bad Batch members on the Marauder. Hunter is warning Omega that you can't trust Ventress. You don't know the things that she did in the war. And Omega says, I don't know much about the war, but things are different now. She could have killed you guys. She had the chance and she didn't. She says people can change, just like you looking at Crosshair. So the next day, Omega goes down to the docks for the next bit of training without the other Bad Batch members. They go out on a boat to the middle of the water where they're far away from the island. Asajj says this will make it easier for her to concentrate. And she says that most people who wield the Force have an affinity for nature, and they can connect to the living things that respond to their energy. So she has Omega stand on the side of the ship and try to connect with the life. Omega fails to connect with anything, but I actually believe that she did. But we'll get to that in a second. Ventress steps up and shows her what to do. We then see a bunch of glowing fish start to circle around the boat, as we see Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair looking over them from afar. The fish then swim away, and they begin to get attacked by a giant kraken-looking creature. This creature is named the Vrathian. Hunter sees this and says get to the Marauder as they try to go help. Omega asks Ventress if she summoned that, and Ventress says not intentionally. Now, I believe that Omega is actually the one who summoned this creature. When she tried to connect with the nature, she just didn't mean to do that. She was probably just poking the bear. But there's no real evidence to back that up. I just think Ventress wouldn't mess up like that, and Omega probably would. But their boat flips over and they're tossed into the water. As Omega gets dragged down, Ventress dives into the water, pulls out her lightsaber, and saves Omega. Now, we rarely see lightsabers being used underwater, but one of the first times we saw this was in the Clone Wars Season 4 with Kit Fisto on his home world underwater. Ventress and Omega climb back on the boat, but the Marauder comes in and starts blasting the Vrathian, and Asajj tells them to stop because she can handle this. She then gets picked up by the creature, and before getting eaten, connects with it just like Ezra Bridger in Star Wars Rebels, and she saves the day. The episode ends with Ventress leaving the planet, and before she does, Omega asks her, did you figure it out? Do I have a high M count? To which Ventress replies, no. Which again, I think is foreshadowing to next week's episode called Identity Crisis, because Asajj Ventress is lying. Omega walks away and Crosshair says the same thing, that she's lying. And Ventress tells them that she'd have to be trained, and that means she would have to leave you guys. And Omega's not going to do that. But the fact is, the Empire is hunting her down, and they won't stop until they find her. I think this is alluding to two things. One, the Empire, of course, invading Pabu, like I said at the beginning of this video. And two, the Bad Batch are all going to die by the end of this third season. Crosshair, Hunter, Wrecker, Echo, all of them. And Omega is going to be left alone. And her only option is going to be to go off with Asajj Ventress and train in the ways of the Force. And personally, I think this could lead to the next Star Wars animated show after the Bad Batch, but that remains to be seen. And Hunter says, aren't you worried about the Empire coming after you? Ventress says, they can try, but I got a few lives left. This is teasing at the fact that she's like a cat who has multiple lives, because we know that she already died in the canon novel Dark Disciple. So this doesn't really explain how Ventress is still alive in front of us today, but I actually think that explanation will happen in Tales of the Jedi Season 2. do. And Ventress's last line in this episode is just teasing at that. And that's it. That's the entire episode. The Harbinger was Asajj Ventress, and we got to see her test Omega to see if she is force sensitive, which she is. I rank this episode a 9 out of 10. This is probably one of the best episodes of the entire series so far. We learned so much about midichlorians and the Force, and it's foreshadowing what's going to happen at the end of this third season and what's coming after the Bad Batch ends. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. Rank this episode out of 10, because I think this show is just going to get even better from here, as it's possible that we could be seeing the big blue meanie Grand Admiral Thrawn in this final season, but I explain all of that in this video right here.